Hello and welcome back to our third session in our foundations or our summer security foundation series. For those that haven't been taking this or aren't familiar with me, maybe you just happened upon our live stream here. My name's Keith Wilson, I'm the director of cybersecurity education for AttackIQ. I'm one of the instructors for AttackIQ as well, featured in many of the courses. Coincidentally enough, not the one we're going to be talking about today. The one we're talking about today was actually written by a coworker here um, several years ago, actually, and we really haven't had to update it because the concept of purple teaming hasn't really changed. So we're going to be reviewing some of the info covered in the course Foundations of Purple Teaming. This is kind of like a group study session, but on the internet, right? So we've opened it up to everybody to give everyone a chance. If you haven't taken the course, I highly recommend you go sign up for our Summer Security Foundations Learning Path and take it. If what we talk about seems interesting, we're giving out a special badge on Credly if you complete this learning path. Um, and please ask questions as we go. I'll try to kind of go back and forth here between what I have prepared to talk about, which is just kind of a quick summary of the course, and we're going to hit on some of the concepts we talk about in the course. Um, I'll try and go back and forth between that and your questions, and we have at least one question that was submitted ahead of time, so I'll be happy to answer that as well. But please put your questions in chat, and I'll try and get to them as we go through. So I think it's best that we start with a definition of purple teaming. Now, purple teaming is an organizational concept which seeks to maximize defensive capabilities by coordinating and coupling the activities of the red and blue team. So let's explain that a bit more to kind of illustrate what we're talking about here. Now, purple teaming is an activity. It's not a job role. You do not create a new purple team. This isn't a new group of people that you are hiring into your team. You run purple teaming exercises with both your offensive red team and your defensive blue team. Now, a lot of you joining this call may already work in security and you kind of know what those responsibilities are. But let's cover it for those that are maybe students or just kind of dipping their toe into the water security, or those that are part of security and are still kind of trying to feel out what all these terms are about. Let's go ahead and explain these up front. Okay. So blue teams are charged with defending an organization against cyber threats. Blue teams are well read in business processes and outcomes they defend and should work closely with IT operations to ensure they enact the correct controls in alignment with what the business requires. So, this is a team of folks that understand what's important to the business, what if broken in the business would cause a lot of heartache and problems for that business, and then they are in charge of defending that. So they're familiar with the architecture they defend. And blue teams are specialists in detecting, investigating, and resolving anomalous behavior and out of the ordinary events in an IT infrastructure. So a lot of different jobs kind of fall into this blue team. Blue teams are generally more of the defensive posture. Um, You'll generally see a variety of disciplines like threat hunting, incident response, vulnerability management, all sorts of different things. They're also continuing to work to harden their posture. Now, red teams, what do red teams do? Red teams emulate threats in a carefully targeted fashion to test an organization's defenses against truly malicious actors, but without the negative impact and business disruption an actual attack would cause. So, red team members have a mindset that's of trying to figure out how to break, subvert, or use systems in a way in which they weren't intended, right? So, a lot of outside of the box creative sort of the instructor for this course, Ben Opal, used to refer to it as a devious sort of mindset, right? In trying to figure out how to get around in ways that you didn't necessarily intend for them to when you were architecting your IT solutions. Now, the actions taken by red team members are informed by viable threats the business faces. That's, at Attack IQ Academy, we talk about threat informed defense, right? So they're not emulating, the latest, greatest, kind of coolest, whatever newest attack is, right? That's not necessarily what, at least not what we discuss in Attack IQ Academy in terms of emulation, but they're emulating threats that are more likely to target the business, right? What type of threat groups, what type of um, bad actors, what type of campaigns could be targeted towards them. So red teams are threat emulation specialists able to adapt that threat intelligence or a sample code into safe, workable emulations, which realistically test defenders and defenses. Now, purple teaming couples and coordinates red and blue to maximize the capabilities and impacts of both. Traditionally we hear about pen tests or red team exercises, and people ask me, what's the difference between having your red team go at it and doing a purple teaming exercise? And it really is just an exercise where the two groups actually talk to each other. Both groups are fully aware of what's going on at the time. We're going to talk about this in the process, why that's important when we get to the next slide here in process. Now, the purple teaming aligns the blue team's mission focus with relevant threats, allowing them to base defensive architectures on business critical needs. It applies that sort of red thinking that I just spoke about to carefully balanced and curated enterprises to show stakeholders how their most critical capabilities can be compromised and give clear guidance on defending them. Fundamentally, it offers operators and analysts the means to align detection to threat in a very structured way. I'm going to do a real quick check here to see if we have any questions in chat. None yet. None yet. But if you do have any questions, again, please feel free to put them right in the chat and I'll be happy to answer them. Or you can wait till the end too. We have a segment for questions at the end. Okay, so let's talk about this process, this purple teaming process. So first, the red team executes iterative attacks against friendly cyberspace tuned to replicate adversary capabilities and prevent irrevocable disruption. So the attacks that they have planned are attacks against your infrastructure that have been created in a way to mimic your adversary, but also, most importantly, to prevent irrevocable disruption, right? So they're safe to an extent. Next, stopped attacks generate reports of detection and mitigation details back to the red team. So if the blue team stops that attack, right? So red team's trying something, blue team goes, "Ha, we caught you," or our defenses were able to stop this from occurring. They share that with the red team and they tell them what mitigation and how they were caught, right? Now, successful attacks, oops, sorry, getting a little ahead of myself there. Successful attacks generate reports of attack method and exposure details back to the blue team. So if the red team gets through those defenses, they come back and tell the blue team exactly how they did it, right? Now, the reason for this is so that when they do this joint debrief here in step 4, all the actions are coordinated with IT ops so that mitigations are put in place, the attacks are refined, and the attack surface is reduced. So what that means is if the red team's successful, we have to put mitigations in place. The red team has told the blue team how they're successful, so they're able to now put a mitigation in place specifically for the method that the red team used. Now, after this, they're going to iterate, and we talk about continuous testing, right? So we're going to iterate that test, and the red team, I'll put that mitigation in place. Now the red team may make a slight change to their testing to see, okay, can we do we still detect this or prevent this even with this modified change? What you're trying to create realistically are prevents and detects, and the analytics for those on highly targeted, specific threat actor TTPs, right? We've talked about the pyramid of pain a couple times. I brought it up in some of our courses, but at the very top of that pyramid are those refined actions that don't that are TTPs that aren't going to set off a ton of false positives. They're also not going to be. You also won't worry about false negatives either, right? So that's what we're getting out of this. So you do the continuous testing and improvement to refine those detection capabilities and enable ever more difficult scenario execution. So as the red team is able to get through, the blue team builds their mitigation. The blue team prevents the red team. They share with the red team how so that the red team can try it a different way in case we need to put another mitigation in to block that different way. Uh, Purple teaming is really a simple concept. You only need to answer a few basic questions in both planning and execution of your purple teaming exercise. And the first is, who wants to hack me? So understanding who the threat actors are that are targeting your enterprise or your industry or your location. How might they do it? So, what are the different vulnerabilities that exist in my environment? And also, what are the TTPs that those attackers normally use? So, how do those match up? Are my controls set up to stop it? So this is from the blue team perspective. We got the little, color coding there if you notice on there, right? So the blue team during purple teaming are going to try and understand if their controls are truly set up to stop that bad behavior. And we're also trying to figure out how can we test our controls, right? In order to answer that question, how do are my controls set up to stop this bad behavior? Now, in order to get executive sponsorship, it's important to understand the business benefits of engaging in purple teaming exercises. Optimize security program ROI by aligning defenses to threats you're likely to face. So these are again some of the benefits that you can preach to executive leaderships to let them know what they get for their return on investment on this. I mean, you are spending a good deal of time in order to do this and possibly even a good deal of money in order to do a purple teaming exercise. So you're going to have to get buy-in, right? Buy-in's important in any sort of business setting. So some of the benefits you can tell them that it provides: optimize security program ROI by aligning defenses and threats you're likely to face. You can continuously enhance enterprise defensibility by allowing the security team to spend more time hunting and less time waiting, and allowed to monitor to continuously focus more where it's needed. It can also be used to solve systemic issues through creating more and more gainful opportunities for collaboration across business units and IT or security, and drive that cross-functional growth. So there's a lot of you can discover not only problems within your technology, but also within your processes and the way that different departments communicate. Okay, gonna do a quick check for questions. Seeing no questions yet, that's okay. I'm going to go ahead and talk about the four phases of purple teaming, and the course itself really gets into each of those. So if you haven't taken foundations of purple teaming as part of this learning path we have set up, then highly recommend you go take it. We get into the nitty gritty detail, or I should say the instructor Ben gets into the nitty gritty detail. And there's also two intermediate follow-up purple teaming courses that go with it on a separate purple teaming learning path. So if this stuff's interesting you and you haven't taken the course yet, go start there. That's going to get into a lot more detail on this. Okay, that's my quick advertisement for you. So let's quickly review the four phases of purple teaming. Now, the first is orientation. This is where you gain an understanding of what you will be testing by understanding what the mission of your organization is, what your environment looks like that you're trying to defend, knowing which actors and actions are threats to your organization's mission, and the security controls that are currently in place to defend the organization. So we're orienting ourselves to the threat landscape into our enterprise architecture. Now, the next phase of purple teaming is planning and preparation. In this phase, you're going to set the scope of the exercise, determining what will and won't be tested. You'll plan the order and timing of your emulations. Now, some of the suggestions that we give at Academy is you should plan for about 3 to 4 weeks of preparation, right? You're going to do a whole lot more preparation on this than you will actual, implementation and running of the emulation. But it's for good reason. I mean, we're talking serious stuff here, and we've promised to match business needs to these tests. So there's a lot in planning that, right? So you're going to have 3 to 4 weeks of prep, 1 week for execution, and it's going to be about 4 days worth of work per shift. We also recommend that you plan for one more day of execution than you think you'll need to complete all of your emulations. You'll also empower trusted agents who are fully aware of all aspects of the emulation and have the ability to deconflict as necessary. And they also have ceasefire authority to where they can end what's going on in case something is, in case something has gone way off the rails and it's starting to cause problems with the business. They do have the authority to call a ceasefire. This phase, so phase 2, is going to finish with creating your emulation plan that aligns business assets to potential threats and controls that should prevent or detect those threats. And we give you actually a spreadsheet to do this, right? We give you lots of worksheets and spreadsheets to do this in this class and the other purple teaming classes that we have. Now, with all of the planning and research you've done so far, we've got to move into phase 3. And this is probably the most fun. This is the exciting phase. This is where you run it, right? And this is where the process we highlighted earlier comes in. Red team executes if blue catches, they share how. Red adjusts and the process is iterated. If the blue team doesn't catch it, red team shares what they did so that the blue team can build better mitigations, right? So here's where we're starting to run our emulation and really starting to learn the lessons from our controls and seeing how they're able to stand up, right? Now, in this final phase of purple teaming, you begin your outbrief with your stakeholders. Super important, right? You promised executive sponsors and stakeholders results. So you are now responsible for getting them and debriefing them on those results. Now, you should be debriefing red and blue teams each day, but at the very end, you'll want to do an outbrief. We recommend no longer than an hour after that final daily debrief you do with the red and blue teams, no longer than an hour after that when you do your outbrief with your stakeholders. Okay. This makes sure that the information's fresh, that the conversations, things can be remembered. I mean, you're capturing a lot of this stuff as well. Now, make sure that the reports you are producing are appropriate for the audience. And you can come back later and have a full report on everything because you're going to have multiple audiences ranging from less technical executives to highly technical security team members, depending on what their job role is. And it's important that the information contained in the reports those individuals see relates to them. Otherwise, they're not going to read them, right? Or they're going to be confused by them. Now, with the information provided in the report, the team should make decisions on how to deploy mitigations and also plan for future iterations of the purple teaming exercise. Now, I know today's session, we're actually running a little bit ahead of other ones we have in the past, just because I'm not getting real into the detail with this course. I think there's too much in there for me to do it all in 30 minutes. So I wanted to make sure I gave a good enough summary to go over some of the points that, frankly, the foundational things that people miss about purple teaming that I think need to be reiterated, and to answer your questions here. So let's go ahead, and I'm going to leave it open for questions. I will check in the comments again to see if there's any chat or any questions there. But if you have them, go ahead and post them. And if you don't, or if you think of them later, you can actually always email us at academy@attackiq.com with your questions. Always happy to answer educational questions about purple teaming or threat-informed defense. Okay, so before I check again on questions, I do have one of our previously submitted questions that was submitted before the session, and the question comes from Michael Ogun Yami, and I'm sorry if I messed up your name, from the United Kingdom. His question is, what kind of tools am I going to be exposed to? Okay. So when it comes to purple teaming, you aren't necessarily going to be exposed to any sort of new tools, since a lot of what you're doing is performing your job role as you normally would, just under emulated threat conditions. Now you may get exposed to a lot of tools that will help with planning exercises or implementing mitigations. So you may start to use things put out by MITRE puts out a ton of things like emulation plans, attack, the defend framework, CAR, which is the cyber analytics repository. You could also be exposed to more administrative type planning tools, like some of the spreadsheets that we discuss and provide in our purple teaming courses. So our courses I mentioned earlier have a lot of planning, helpful worksheets for planning in there as well. And then we teach you how to use them in the courses. Now, breach and attack simulation, or BAS software like AttackIQ, which if you don't know, AttackIQ actually sells software. Some of you may think we only have the academy, but we actually sell software. That's what we do, and it's considered breach and attack simulation software. Now, and we teach you how to use it too. So you may get exposed to that, because that could also be considered a tool you could use for purple teaming. If you didn't have a red team, or if you really wanted to scale your operations. Now, we'll be discussing breach and attack simulation next week when we talk about foundations of breach and attack simulation. So that's our course for next week. So if this is the first time you're hearing the word BAS, or breach and attack simulation, I can't stress enough to you, really good, go sign up for our learning path that we're on right now. So you get the badge, right, for doing the work. You get a badge for each course, plus you get a badge for this learning path. Take foundations of breach and attack simulation in that course, and we'll be discussing that next week. I'm going to switch back here one more time just to see if we've got any questions. All right, I'm seeing some comments come in. You're asking me to share the slides. So unfortunately, you're not going to like this answer. I'm not going to share my slides. The reason being, if you take this course, the Foundations of Operationalizing, or Foundations of Purple Teaming course, these slides are taken right from there. And with that course, and with all of our courses, if you go once you're in the course, if you go above the navigation menu that's on the left-hand side, you'll see a big button that says additional resources from inside of the course. So you have to be in the Foundations of Purple Teaming course. Once you're inside, click on additional resources, and you'll see something in there that's called the student guide, or we may have called it a course guide, and download that. That has all of the words that the instructor is saying, all of the things, most of the things I've been saying are written out for you, like a mini textbook, and any sort of important graphics from the slides will be included as well. So we don't give out any of our slide decks just for that reason, because a lot of the times you end up not having context for it. So we like to provide the student guide, which will make sure that you have the context to go with the slides that we're talking about. All right. Let me see here. I appreciate y'all being on. Let's see. Let's see. In purple teaming in theory, but in practice, how can one who is venturing into the field of cybersecurity, a graduate, be able to understand the practical aspects of purple teaming? For instance, purple and red teaming have labs for practice or internship opportunities. Not about purple teaming. So, I would say take a traditional lab that you would do for red teaming, and just apply the blue team side of it. If you're if you have to do it yourself, Daniel. So Daniel Friday, I see you on there with your question, right? So if it's just you, then it makes it even harder, right? Because it really does help to work collaboratively. But if you have some colleagues or some friends that are into security that you can do this with, take some of these red teaming labs and run through them with sensors installed or something to collect data. And then look and see what their output is, right? And then trying to write a detection rule for it. So you could even use something like you could use some sort of open source sim, right? If you wanted to do like an elk stack or something like that. Um, and just make sure you have sensors in the environment where you're running these lab exercises. Um, the Center for Threat Informed Defense from MITRE Ingenuity, they have an adversary emulation library. We actually teach a couple of those emulation plans on AttackIQ Academy. I think we teach Fin6, and there's one other one that's escaping me right now. I can't remember the name of it. I do have another one that I'm actually just working on. I'm hoping to record it this week, and I'm hoping to have it released. Fingers crossed by the end of this month. I'd really like to have it released for you. An emulation plan on Ocean Lotus that the CTID put out. So going through those emulation plans as well, if you're able to execute them. Again, having a sensor set up to look at the blue team side of things, right? So you understand I'm executing this attack. These are the analytics I'm getting that come in, and then maybe work on the detection analytics side of that. How can I write better analytics for what just occurred? Right. So, there's no, there's real, I wish there was some existing resource of like purple team range or purple team tabletop exercises I could point you to. But I would really say, almost create your own. You're going to have to do it with colleagues. It's going to take a lot of planning, but a real purple teaming exercise will do that. With that being said, the two other purple teaming courses that we have do also teach a lot about emulating and or building those emulation plans and understanding what the threats are to build those emulation plans. So you can get hands-on experience just by taking those courses. I think we have written labs that go with them that encourage you to kind of create these plans. Those would be my recommendations for a starting point, to get those opportunities, to say that you've you haven't necessarily been part of a purple teaming exercise, but I think it'd be really impressive if I had a job candidate that was out of university that came in and said, yeah, I set up this red teaming exercise, but at the same time, I wanted to see the blue team on the other side of it. So I set up a sim to look at the log files. Then I built some detection analytics. Then I reran the emulation again, and the detection caught it. So then we changed the emulation a little bit so that it wouldn't catch it. So that we built another emulation around it. I hope you get what I'm saying there. So it's going to be a lot of work. You're not going to have some simple module that you can just be dropped into for something like that, but it can certainly be done. Great question. Great question. All right. If there's no other questions, we're going to go ahead and end the session. If you do have questions, though, please email academy@attackiq.com if you're thinking of them later. Really appreciate you guys joining us today, and please take our Summer Security Foundations learning series or learning path to get that extra badge, because at the end of this summer, it's gone. Those that have the badge have it. Nobody else is going to be able to get it. Nobody else will be able to take that learning path. We'll be closing it off at the end of summer. So limited time. Do it today, and we'll see you next week here when we talk about foundations of breach and attack simulation. Daniel, I see your question. I'm going to answer it in the comments later. So check out my answer on LinkedIn. But thank you again. Appreciate your time on this. Everyone, have a great week.